In a couple of minutes, I will hand over to the moderator of today, which is Lekha Sishta. Welcome, Lekha.
Thank you, Sylvia.
We will introduce the speakers, but before she does that, and before I introduce Lekha, just in case you have not attended the launch of the Divershefy Club on October 1st, let me give you a quick introduction. Divershefy brings women into boardrooms and C-suites. The Divershefy Club is a new global network of women who are in boardrooms and C-suites, who support other women to get there, with the help of board members, investors, and corporate leaders. The video recording of the launch event has been shared with all registered participants, and if you do not see it in your inbox, please check your spam folder. You can also find out more about Divershefy by visiting www.divershefy.club. So we have a full week of events with international speakers for you as part of the launch of the Divershefy Club to highlight the issues that Divershefy is addressing. The overall topic of the launch series is Women Leaders Changing the World. The topic for today is Gender Balanced Leadership, the Role of HR. We will have an hour for the panel discussion, followed it's a fireside chat today, actually, for the fireside chat, followed by a 20-minute Q&A section. And Kiranmai will, in the beginning, also have a little part where she's just talking, giving us more of a background of her field. Please put your question and answers in the Q&A section. In the chat, we might not see it. This session will be recorded and made available to all registered participants until October 12th. Thereafter, the recording will be available only to members of Divershefy Club. You can sign up for membership at www.divershefy.club. So back to today's session. Let me introduce you to our moderator for today, Lekha Sishta. With 40 years of work experience, her last 20 years in head HR roles, Lekha won multiple awards for her passion for talent management and HR. Today, she wears many hats. She's a talent and HR strategist, a business advisor, a startup and leadership mentor, a management faculty, an academic board advisor, and many more. So thank you, Lekha, for joining us today, and I'm handing over to you.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. That was nice, short and sweet. Thank you. So it is my honor to introduce the two experts who will lead us through this very interesting topic for this evening or today, based on where you are in the world. But before that, I would like to throw some light on why this topic. Why should HR have to worry about gender balanced leadership? Well, it is a recognized fact, much discussed and agreed upon, that it's not just a checkbox, but it makes very good business sense to have more women in leadership positions and also on the board. It brings a clear jump upward in market strength, in corporate reputation, in employer image and profits. And why? What spurs this acceleration? Let's just take a look at the school and college graduation and competitive exam results, especially in India. Most certainly, girls have had better ranks and marks than boys. Well, an argument could always be made that it is cultural socialization in our country that forces girls to study harder, not only because they are forced to have fewer distractions outside the home, but also if they don't want to get pushed into the marriage market too early, they would need to score and earn a seat in a good college or university and later also in a job. I, of course, speak for the large majority in the middle class and the economically disadvantaged sections. So if one looks at IQ and innovation, there is really no difference between men and women. Talent will float to the surface anywhere. Now, I know I'm making a generalization. Exceptions are always there, and I use that line to plead my case. When it comes to communication, relationships, collaboration, compassion, multitasking, emotional quotient, women certainly score over men. It is equally clear that in leadership positions like the much adulated level 5 leadership, those with professional will and personal humility, These soft skills matter a great deal more. Naturally then, the call for more women in leadership positions and on the board. And if the growth of business really does need women rising up the pipeline, who in the company would help to set the stage? Let's talk of this in the analogy of drama and theater. HR slips almost naturally into the driver's seat, or let me say, the director's chair. Not only to set the backstage by arc lights on the right kind of policies and SOPs, but by also getting the audition, which is hiring, for the main actors done, offering the right price and terms, which is compensation and benefits, putting them in the roles, which is onboarding, getting enough practice sessions, coaching, learning, training, and development, ensuring that their interest and the talent of the actors is kept honed, which is employee engagement, keeping the understudy on track, succession planning, all to ensure that they are appreciated for the value that they bring, performance management, both by the audience as well as the rest of the cast, which is the organizational stakeholders. And at the same time, impact the overall repute of the play in action, right? Which is employer branding and execution. And you can see all these are functions of HR, and they come so beautifully into play. Okay, that's another pun. Well, that's hence the topic, the role of HR in gender-based leadership. Now, before I run away with myself, give me a mic and I can go on and on. My alternate avatar as a professor, I guess. Well, let me bring the spotlight on our two experts who will get into a conversation on this topic. Vanitha Datla, a founding member at Divershefy Club, is the vice chairperson and managing director at Lekha Limited. She has served several stints as the chair of the Indian Women Network, a primary arm of CII. Her prior engagements include being the managing director at Rasi Finance and Investments and the finance director of Anjali Portland Cement. Vanitha, congratulations. I read recently that Lekha was awarded the 2020 Working Mother and Avatar 100 Best Companies for Women in India. And this is a whammy, 5 times in a row. Well done. It's so apt that it comes at this time that Divershefy is being launched. A champion of fitness, Vanitha was an avid and regular marathoner cyclist till a year ago, when she was forced to give up the sport due to an unfortunate major accident. Her favorite leisure pastime now is playing with her 2 granddaughters. Yes, she is a grandmother twice over. Can you imagine the glam grandma? At this time, she is sad about the temporary halt to her traveling caused by COVID and fondly recalls the life-changing trip to Mansarovar back in 2004, where she literally came back not just refreshed, but renewed and enlightened about her own capabilities and passion. I think that's wonderful. Vanitha will be in conversation with Dr. Kiranmai Pandyala. Kiranmai is the head of HR at Western Digital. Having been in a variety of companies over her career, she was earlier the corporate vice president in AMD. She was also the head of HR and site administration at ICE India and started its data services here. She is on the governing boards of several higher educational institutions and deemed universities, including United Way, showing the way for graduates of tomorrow. She is a passionate leader with an overriding mission to drive D&I wherever she is. Like Vanitha, she too loves kids and also spends her free time playing with them and with her dogs. Now, they make a wonderful combination for this session. While Kiranmai is the expert in HR, we've got Vanitha as a person in the C-suite. I am so looking forward to the engaging time ahead for the next 75 minutes, and I hope all of you in the audience are too. Thank you so much, Vanitha and Kiran, for accepting our invitation to take over this conversation. It's over to you now, Vanitha.
Thank you so much, Lekha. It was such a wonderful way that you set the context for today's panel discussion, or should I say the virtual fireside chat that I'm going to have with my very, very dear friend, Kiranmai. It was actually a pleasure to be on this particular event because Lekha I very well know, and also Kiranmai. So it feels like, no, I've come for maybe a cup of coffee into the drawing room of maybe Kiranmai or maybe Lekha, and just having a nice casual chat about what's happening probably in the corporate world or around the globe, in fact, for that matter. So I'd like to welcome all of you today to this beautiful fireside chat that I'm going to have with dear Kiran. But before I start volleying some question answers at her, maybe she will actually set a little bit of context by showing us a few slides that she prepared very graciously for this particular event. She said she will talk about what it is about balancing gender in the higher echelons of corporate India, especially, or in the corporate world across the world, in many countries across the world, because Kiran has the ability to bring her expertise to these international companies of which she has been a part of. Lekha has spoken about the companies that Kiran has worked for, whether it was AMD, whether it was ICE, or right now for Western Digital. So Kiran, I will request you to put up your slides. Take us through a small masterclass maybe, and then I'll start posing my questions to you. Over to you, Kiranmai.
Thank you, Vanitha. As you rightly said, yeah, this looks more like, we are engaging with each other in one of our homes. Like we used to hang out and, talk about various topics. So it's really pleasant, especially given the pandemic and, we are missing each other. We don't have the socializing. So can I have the slides, please? So a couple of slides for us to just set the context. While it's a fireside chat, we also thought the participants would love to have some clear visual cues as well as clear takeaways in terms of recall and understand what's happening across the globe and what have some of the internationally reputed organizations have done in terms of the strides they have taken. Because it's easier said than done when we talk about gender balanced leadership. I know Yogini was earlier mentioning about what about the other gender? What about the third gender? In fact, if you look up, you will find astonishing number of genders. We are only looking at a male and a female and a third gender today because that is what we are getting used to. But if you really look up a dictionary, it's more than 57 different genders which exist. So we're not getting there. The struggle or challenge of even getting the woman a foot in the door or getting her the right stature still continues to be a challenge. And some of the good to great companies, as we say, or corporations have started on this journey some time ago. And we will see what are those few companies which have made a difference because of the passion and the energy they have put in. So the next slide will actually give us what is it that I'm looking at. This is giving you a snapshot. I mean, I love this, a couple of quotations or, what some of these leaders passionately believed in. I'm not going to read through it because you can read it far better than me. Just look at what they believe in. They're ardently, as Lekha has said the context, yeah, how does HR as an advisor, as a consultant, work along with the business, work along with the CEO, C-suite, and ensure that we have a gender balance ensured in the organization. So some of these very critical leaders have looked at what worked for them in achieving this near impossible goal, right? So just look at what are we talking about? I can talk to you about the 5-year Sodexo. We're just talking about a 5-year, right? Not even a decade. A 5-year Sodexo case study. If you're familiar with it, it'll resonate with you. If you're not familiar, you'll see that what this company has accomplished within 5 years. So it's about being focused, and if you march towards the goal, it is achievable. That's what it tells us. Then we also have a 10-year journey, which Unilever, again, has undertaken. Let's take a look at this case study and see what have they set their eyes on, and have they accomplished it? And then I also want to give you a snapshot of one of the major consulting organizations, Mercer, for instance, and what are the key steps based on the survey and the study they have conducted in terms of the 6 key steps in order to achieve or attain what we refer to as gender balanced leadership. So if we move to the next one, this gives you a snapshot of the Sodexo case study. Very clear in terms of the findings. It's a 5-year journey, as I mentioned. And what did they really focus on? When they looked at really getting the women, because you're talking about 50% easily of the workforce or the talent pool we refer to across the globe, be it Asia, be it internationally, mature economies, any economy, you'll find women exist, right? And in terms of the numbers, even in schools, universities, but then somehow they magically disappear when it comes to getting into the workforce, A. And once they get into the workforce as well, you do not see them rising on the career ladder. They drop off. So, and it's the same scenario, be it the developing countries as we talk about, or be it the developed nations. So it requires a lot of impetus and focused intervention, targeted objectives for an organization to get there. So Sodexo has started on that journey, and they put a 5-year plan, right? These are not like government 5-year plans, please. This is a true case of a 5-year plan which has fructified. So what have they found after they've achieved this? They clearly found that it improved their employee retention, which is what every organization looks forward to and continues to be a major challenge even today for majority of the organizations. So they have found that a gender balanced entity had an average employee retention rate that is way above any other entity. So 8 percentage points, that's huge. Higher levels of employee engagement. Again, they found 14 percentage points higher in comparison with an organization which doesn't have gender balanced leadership. Better client retention. So it's also the clients and customers they work with. They found again 9 percentage points higher when it comes to client retention. If you're looking at safer workplaces, today all of us are talking about the pandemic, and employees' safety and well-being is one of the major criteria or priorities for everybody in the management and the boards. So safer workplaces, they found 12 percentage points higher in comparison with organizations or teams which didn't have the gender balanced leadership. Again, operating margins, which is the key for any business. It's a key driver when you look at the operating margins. So again, there is a 8 percentage points higher percentage of operating margins in organizations or entities where they have gender balanced leadership. So aren't these proof points enough for us when we look at Sodexo case study saying, oh my God, there is a clear, compelling imperative for organizations to really adopt and embrace gender balanced leadership. So if I move on to the next slide, which talks about the Unilever case study. Look at this. Again, wonderful. What is appreciable about Unilever is they had a charter for 10 years, and early in 2010, they started on this journey, and 2020, by the end of the year is when they should have accomplished, or the attempt is to accomplish the gender balanced leadership in the key managerial levels. And they have achieved it almost a full year ahead, which is kudos to them. That clearly shows the passion and the drive and the energy of right from the top leadership layer to go across on this charter. So if you look at the case study, the 10-year case study, lead change from the top. So if you look at the CEO, it starts with the C-suite. The CEO himself, Alan Yope, is a firm believer in this. When we talk about D&I, diversity and inclusion. Of course, today we look at it as an expanded form of not just D&I. We're all talking today about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it's not just diversity and inclusion, It's DEI. The reason is, and I'm sure all of you heard this analogy, if I just switch gears, diversity, as we all know, is, are we getting an invitation for a dance party? That's where it begins. A very simplified version. Yeah, okay, you're invited for a dance. So that is diversity. Okay, everybody is included. You go in there, are you invited? Somebody actually says, can I invite you for the dance? So that means you have the opportunity to dance, not just be there as a spectator. That is inclusion. But belonging, wherein you really have a say, your voice is heard, is when you can pick up the music of your choice. You can ask for, what do you want to dance for? The tune you like. That is belonging and the equity. So I'm sure several of you heard this, but you don't see it or you don't witness it very often in the organizations or in the communities we are part of. So when you look at leading change from the top, that's what Unilever CEO talked about. Then improving the numbers and culture at the same time. Look at this. I mean, I love that. Numbers is like the target you're looking at, but culture, the fundamental basic element of the organization. It's a DNA. So you're not just looking at the numbers and say, oh, we are in the numbers race. But if you just hit the numbers, that will drop off after a while because you haven't really built it into the culture. So Unilever is also looking at holistically sifting the sand so that culturally they embrace it and it's embedded. So while they're increasing on the numbers, that's what happened. Otherwise, numbers in silo obviously is not going to help them sustain it. And then talking about the stereotypes, I'm sure it's very tiring for several of you. You must have experienced it at times. At times you're like, oh, we're still looking at male and female stereotypes and the leadership styles and all this, right? So how do you tackle these stereotypes and intentionally, that's the key word, offer this support? So they have done an internal study to understand how does these stereotypes operate and how do they have to tackle it? So sensitizing every layer by layer in the organization, and then they're able to bring in what we refer to as the equity framework of the mindset. Then that's where the unconscious biases, all of us deal with it. So the unconscious bias, we've heard it, I've heard it since I was a child, that's how I feel. But not much perhaps has changed in certain organizations still. There's so much to be desired. So unconscious bias sensitization. The more people are aware, because if you can identify, that's a first step for you to take and say, I'm not going to look at women as somebody different. They bring themselves as much as I come in terms of their merit, and they lend a very different perspective. They're different and hence they belong here. That is the kind of perspective which various co-workers need to develop. So addressing unconscious bias. Then look at this, new parents, offering better support to new parents. So anyone who's a new parent, so the paternity leave we talk about, right? The parental leave policy. So it's not just the maternity. India, of course, Canada and India are the two countries across the globe today where they stand out in terms of the length of time. Canada, of course, tops the charts. It's 1 year where a woman who has given birth can really take care of the child and then get back into employment. In India, very recently, this change has been made a couple of years ago, as you all are aware. So 6 months is what it is. So all these help women to get back into workforce rather than drop out, right? So they also looked at, but there are several countries where it's not just the woman who needs that support, but also the males who would require that because they may not have this support infrastructure. So they need to get paternity leave. Or there are, we're talking about homosexuals, and they may really, same gender couples as we say, they may need to really think about having a paternity or parental leave. That's why the neutral term, instead of saying maternity, paternity, you're talking about parental leave. So all these measures in terms of, this is the new age thinking. You're looking at who is going to be your engaged employee, and their needs are different. their sexual orientation is different. But you have to adopt all those and absorb and say, how do I ensure the workplace is where they're able to bring in relevant policies? That's where HR comes to play, as Rekha mentioned, right? The audition, as well as creating, the arch slides and creating the relevant script and so on. So the kind of support offered to new parents. And then flexi working, we keep talking about it. Flexi working encourages more people to stay on in the workforce, especially women, because that allows them to take care of their multitasking or the other dependent care and domestic and whatever responsibilities they would love to be engaged in or have to take care of. They can still keep themselves, working if there is flexi working possible. And then taking another interesting thing which Unilever did, all of us have to remember, is it's one thing to talk about it, but another when you start, lifting the hood and looking in. It has huge manufacturing units, and there are workforces which are extremely old school. So they started looking at what are those functions which are more difficult or resistant to change. So they started tackling challenging functions as well as certain markets. Markets would mean certain countries where the outlook may be different culturally, and then they started from there. And then we look at how did they manage the organization-wide shift. Every single thing, and you can go on. I am unable to see the 9th point. One sec. Can you just
yeah, it's understand there's still work to do.
Okay, perfect. So they didn't stop here. They didn't say, oh, we've accomplished and we are done. And this is the beauty of this case study I wanted to really touch upon. They said, we're not going to rest because we just accomplished in terms of an objective. We've arrived there, but we still have to embed and continue this play. So that is the beauty of Unilever case study, where you see a lot of keystrokes in terms of what is the HR play and purpose in ensuring the gender balance. If I move to the final one, where we are looking at Mercer and the 6 key steps, as it talked about, to help build this gender balance. Clearly, the first one is, let's not be in denial. Any organization, anyone who wants to charter this path, admit that there is a problem, but seize the opportunity. Only when you admit that there is an issue, then you will start thinking about how do you tackle it, how do you address it. But if you're in denial, there's no way you're going to solve the problem. Then look at the organization gender diversity strategy. Just as you have a business strategy, look at what is the diversity strategy? What are the priorities? And do you have robust workforce analytics? In other words, it has to be data driven. It can't be just a beautiful vision mission statement with no backup on data. What does the data project? Where are you today? Where would you like to go? And how do you charter that course? Similarly, look at your org diversity strategy and then align it with the talent strategy. So all of us know there is a business strategy, then there is a talent strategy to map or align with it. But along with the talent strategy, you also have to position your gender diversity strategy. That's when you can start building your gender balanced leadership framework for the organization. Then, of course, you have to bring in various programs and benefits only in the context of an enabling environment, because the workplace environment, what are the kind of policies? I just referred in the Unilever case about the parental leave policy, flexi working. So some of these could be the enabling environment, workplace environment, which would invite or attract the right kind of talent, women coming in. So create those policies and programs which will enable or create a better workplace so that you will have the right talent of women entering. Similarly, broaden the org understanding. This is where the sensitization of the entire workforce and all the leaders come in, because you're looking at supporting women. Nobody should look at it as a quota system, or nobody should start creating the disdainful or toxic environment so that women would come in, but they will not be able to thrive or survive, and they would leave. And we wouldn't know why they exited, right? So again, that clear unconscious biases need to be removed or sensitized, and hence they're all open and understanding and ready to support. So men become allies. That's what we're talking about. How do you create that kind of allies or support network within the organization? And then collaborate with other stakeholders. This is the macro environment, not within the organization, to create that impact. You're known as an organization where women would like to come in. So you create that passive as well as an active talent pipeline, as we say. So these are the 6 key steps Mercer, in its survey, has come up with. I thought this would be a great framework for all of us to get started with, because it builds in the context. And some of you perhaps are already thinking, what have your organizations done in order to be on this path, or you're already way ahead? So this is what is the opening of the curtains, I would say, for our fireside chat with Vanitha. Over to you, Vanitha.
Thank you so much, Kiranmai. I think you again delivered a mini masterclass in a very, very short time. I think there was a wealth of information and numerous insights that you were able to bring to us on what gender balanced HR leadership is all about. I would like to touch upon a tricky question, a little bit of a controversial question. But before I do that, let me request Sylvia to probably roll out the next poll so that we have a fairly good idea of what our participants' working organizations are looking like. So Sylvia, would you mind putting up the poll for all our audience to take? And after that, I will touch upon this. It's quite a touchy subject and controversial item that's been happening in the media today. So I thought, let me ask you and your insights on how we should deal with that.
Sure.
So yeah, for all the audience, the question on the poll is, does your organization have women executives on board? And it's of course a multiple choice in case you're part of more than one organization. Please do put in your, cast your vote. And Sylvia, I think we'll get the results of this a little later.
Yeah, right. We can wait until we have at least 75%, and then
Okay.
I'll share the poll, okay?
Okay, so then that means I can go ahead and ask my question then. So Kiran, especially for those living in India, in the news of late, there has been quite a major a news item of a very, very old business group that have seemed to have voted out its only women member. Now, I did ask this in the Women on Boards panel too, and I got various answers for that. But what I would like to ask from you is, in this entire business conglomerate, there must be numerous HR leaders. And you just pointed out that for progressive companies, organizational strategy should align with their talent strategy, which should then align to gender strategy. Don't you think the HR leaders would have been advising their board members that this was a very wrong move on their part to make it all male and to not allow that single women to come in? And this lady was actually very highly qualified. I hear she's a nuclear scientist by qualification. Right. Yet, what do you think is going on in those HR leaders' heads in those business divisions that this company has?
Thanks, Vanitha, for the question. Absolutely. One of the key things, while we're talking about HR, does it have a seat at the table? That's the first question. So while we're talking about business strategy, as well as, the talent strategy and gender diversity strategy, if HR doesn't have a voice and doesn't have a seat at the table, it's just pure play business where it's going to be cutthroat, looking at just certain targets. And perhaps that is one of the key, we talk about, that's where, when you're looking at talent, just as a fiduciary, where you're talking about a CFO, and that's the role you play, you're the expert there. A CFO is so important to constantly look at the harmonizing of the capital efficiencies of the organization, not just short term but long term. HR or the CHRO, whoever, or a people officer, whatever term you call it, has to have a seat at the table and should be considered the advisor and consultant. That's where the culture of that organization, wherein they will understand. Obviously, that organization does not see that value in HR, leading it from the talent strategy. That's what I would say has gone
Absolutely,
wrong.
absolutely spot on, Kiranmai. And I hope that this is a lesson for such businesses, especially family-run businesses, which differ from the professionally run organizations, where the view is taken by one or two people at the table. And
Right.
so I think if we need to compete on a fair level playing ground, we will have to look at these progressive companies. And I love the 6 takeaways that you put up from Mercer. You did talk about having a voice. And this reminds me of a very famous quote by Madeleine Albright, who was the former US Secretary of State. And she
Yes.
said, it took me quite a long time to develop a voice. But now that I have it, I'm not going to be silent. And I think this is the message that CHROs need to be playing in the organizations that they work. Going forward, she also went on to give another very, very nice quote that has been echoing with me. While the world is ready and they have plenty of room for mediocre men, absolutely no place for mediocre women. And in your perspective, do you think that women should come out of their shell from mediocrity and get into meritocracy? And how do they set themselves apart to be able to make themselves visible to the senior leadership so that they can carve out their journey up the ladder?
Two things emerge on my mind, Vanitha, when you mentioned about Madeleine. The first thing is I'm reminded of something which I heard when I was part of AMD. We have at AMD right now, also anyone can look up Dr. Lisa Su is the first woman, ethnic or Asian woman origin who has become a semiconductor or a Fortune 500 semiconductor and a CEO. So Dr. Lisa and I, we spent a lot of time working on multiple, interventions, I should say. And we remember early on when she was not the CEO, but prior to that, she was the COO. And she happened to go to the Wall Street, right? I mean, she was talking to a banker and there was a meeting set up and she was one of those women who was also invited to be part of the C-suite. And it was so interesting for us. Wall Street, as you all know. So they went to the New York and then they went to the meeting. And after a little while, there's a break and she was looking for a washroom or the restroom, right? Because there's a break. And she went around, she couldn't find a women restroom. So she looked around, then she came back and then she asked somebody, hey, by the way, I'm just looking for. And that man just blinked at her and said, oh, we have none. So she got a shock. What does that mean? He said, yeah, usually we don't see women coming here. That one simple statement. And she had to actually walk down in the Wall Street and find a hotel nearby to use a restroom and get back to the meeting. Very simple episode, but it has a huge, that clearly tells you that was a point where you don't even have women in the Wall Street or in banking today. And it's not even too long. We're just talking about half a decade or a little more than that. Look at the number of women. Citigroup has just announced, right? So she's taking over. Of course, India was far ahead. I'm so proud. If you look at the banking revolution in India, clearly majority of the banks, all the ones, have chosen women leadership, right? That has been a very clear revolutionary or an evolutionary one which occurred, and the Western world has started following. So that's one where you don't even, I mean, it's an afterthought or you're not even on the mind because you don't exist. You're not even there in the leadership layer. So that's one problem what Madeleine was referring to. Yeah. Once you find the voice and then how do you exercise it? One is getting there and helping others notice that you exist, then how do you exercise your right to voice your opinion or your thoughts? The other one, which I was thinking of, as you mentioned about this, is the kind of opportunities today we're referring to in terms of being on the board or being in the gender balance leadership. It's not just the interventions. It's all about, are we ready? Are we as women ready? The reason being, a lot of research studies have shown, you ask a man, anybody, in general, I'm just talking about in general, you just go to a man and say, hey, I have this opportunity, and you just tell him a job description, and you say, oh, there is this exciting opportunity, in this company. The man will jump to it without even any hesitation. He is not going to think, am I eligible? Do I have it in me? Can I do it? All these questions he will think later. I'm talking about on an average. There will be exceptions to anything. In general, men are going to jump to it. You go and pose the same thing to a woman. In general, some of us could be in the exception list. In general, majority of the women will start having the self-doubt. Oh, I'm not sure. Do you think I'm eligible? Oh, what are the qualifications they're looking at? So they'll start looking at it with such critical eye, because the first thing stems from, I won't say lack of self-confidence, but more of that self-esteem and self-doubt, because you need somebody to feed into you. Oh my God, you're awesome. You can do this, right? That is where I think culturally and for years together, for centuries together, that marginalization in terms of the voice, in terms of showing up and speaking up, as we say, hasn't occurred. And that's where it stems from, that mindset where I am not sure whether I'm capable. That I need so many people to tell me I'm good. Because if a woman speaks up and shows up, in general, again, those stereotypes come in. I'm considered too aggressive, I'm considered whatever, quote unquote. So I become somebody who is not really in the mainstream of women. So I'm not in my comfort zone. Hence, I tend to fall back and say, oh, I will rather be, maybe I shouldn't, or I need a lot of push. So that mindset is another thing. I would call out to all my women partners, friends, fraternity, whatever. Let's believe in ourselves. Otherwise, we will continue to remain as spiders caught in our own web. So let's cast that out and start looking at, what can I do to make the difference? There is an opportunity, can I seize it? So that mindset shift is what will do the trick most often.
That just leads me to the next question, which in fact, just before you joined the panel, me and Lekha were talking about it. And this, what you defined is the imposter syndrome, which women are, normally guilty of having it. In fact, I was just talking to her and I said, I think even I'm guilty of having the imposter syndrome, because we always have that low self-esteem of ourselves and our capabilities. And we probably need somebody from the outside reinforcing and telling us that we need, and that we do have the capabilities, and whatever it is, take the risk and just jump in. So what is your piece of advice to probably those young girls who are transitioning from, say, the fresher level to middle management, or for that matter, from middle management to senior management? People who are actually facing the imposter syndrome, how do you probably give them a few tips to come out of it? And I know one tip is, no, you talk yourself and you say, no, go ahead, you can do it, just go ahead and do it. Even if you fail, you can always get up and go ahead. But what is advice from your side?
I would look at it in terms of, be ready to embrace the red. What does that mean? Do not be worried, do not be scared, right? Red, whatever we are taught, our mental framework is, it's always danger. So anything which is danger, especially women or marginalized sections, are the ones which are told, oh, stay away from it, okay? Because we're always in the protected class and we enjoy, because even in the family, okay, anything is going wrong, the The first thing is just along with elderly care, it's women who are protected. Right? That is one thing I think we need to shred. So I'm going to embrace the red. I'm going to take that risk. So risk appetite. We are brilliant when it comes to multitasking, championing and driving, the caregiving element. There's so many other aspects which are great strengths in us. If I have to draw upon our own culture, I grew up reading Devi Bhagavatam, which is again something very close to my heart. It talks about those beautiful stories about the Shakti. Shakti is nothing but that huge energy. It's an embodiment of energy, whatever idol we refer to, it's agnostic to religion, but it's about that spirit of that womanhood, that ability to rise above and reach out to your potential. Because a lot of us have huge potential, but we tend to bypass that or allow that to die down. And it's I don't know, I think it's the media, it's various other interventions which always tend to adulate and create a different caricature of women, where you say, oh, sacrifice. I don't know why only women have to sacrifice. Anybody can adjust and accommodate. So those big things, where you impose and create that baggage, and you do not talk about risk appetite of women as much as you create the heroes out of men, championing and driving or leading organizations and so on. If a woman does it, again, you'll have that support infrastructure where they're like, oh, where is the need for you to go and spend so much time outside? Or, oh, in the night, okay, you have left your children behind. So that stigma. The other is the support infrastructure. These youngsters, my hope lies in the youngsters, the millennials, because for them, the purpose is what drives them really. So when you see a purpose, and today's youngsters, men and women alike, I think are much more adjusting and accommodating. They're looking more at the equity of relationships. So they should leverage that and say, all right, I want to really do this. I want to chatter on this path. And I want to, as a stakeholder, can we move along? So just as they help the male counterpart of the partner, the male partner should be able to offer the same helping hand or support to the female partner. Once they charter that, it's a negotiated stakeholder management, just as we talk about in the corporate world, even in the families, right? It's because it's a beautiful way of, enjoying time together, quality time together, but also living up to your dream and fulfilling your dream and enjoying and ensuring that you can lead up to your potential, because there's so much to do in any organization. Women, as I have seen, gender balanced leadership, for instance, Western Digital, I'm so glad to share, the board actually has 50% of women as directors and 50% male. That's a very gender balanced, and C-suite level. So every tap, each level, you'll start seeing that there are executives. And right now we see the mid-level is where we are struggling still, because in hardware, you still don't find too many women takers. And we are, I'm very glad year on year, we are looking at that in terms of how do we demonstrate what our passion and energy is, continuing to up it. And we have seen phenomenal through NCGs and interns. That model in India is really working out very well.
I totally echo your thoughts, Kiran. In fact, whenever I get called to various academic institutions to speak during their graduation ceremonies, one message I always leave with the boys is while in college, they always do date or do befriend the girls who are toppers, who are very active academically,
Right.
socially, and everything. But when they choose marriage, they always look for homebodies. So one
Yes.
piece of advice I told them is please continue that and look at spouses who will continue to work because most of the institutions do have women toppers there. But that
Right.
again doesn't get translated into the workspace. So very relevant tips and insights that you have provided. Another area that women seem to be lacking is probably networking capabilities. And a lot of that has to do maybe with the culture again, as you have spoken. So how does a young girl probably, especially if they're coming in from say tier 2 or tier 3 towns who are not urban educated, or they haven't moved in the urban metro circles, how do they come out? Because suddenly one day you cannot just say that today I'm going to network and I'm going to change into a new leaf. So how does HR actually help such youngsters to get into a more networking sort of relationship?
Sure. Actually, what's happening on the talent management and the diversity strategies in organizations is all this, because we look at where are we sourcing the candidates, as we say, where are our employees coming from. So we do have tier 1, then tier 2, or other towns. So the way the on campus to off campus or into the corporate, we talk about campus to corporate. A lot of companies have adopted this today. They talk about what is really relevant for them in order to grow and develop themselves, and talk about multiple clubs. We talk about employee resource groups within these organizations. So there is a fund pool available to each one of them. They can choose their hobby or passion outside the work, and they can continue to dialogue. So within the organization, we create these little groups where they can hang in with each other, hang out with each other virtually today, but this year and next year perhaps, but otherwise in person. So what happens is they slowly get used to moving out of that cloak and start engaging with the others, and they find it's a safer place to network and learn from each other. Once they do that cross-functionally, we also create these diversity teams. So they have different names, but most of the organizations who are progressive and thinking ahead clearly create the charter for women or gender diversity groups, so that they can voice their ideas, perspectives, they find it safer, and that's the one which is created in terms of the ecosystem. And then the next step is, I'm sure several of you are familiar with certain conferences where there is a lot of diversity or gender focus. Grace Hopper is one such major conference for technology and women. So across the globe, as well as in India, for the last few years, it's been doing very well. So we encourage women, young women included, to participate in these networking events. So sponsorship for women to attend these workshops, these networks, and so on. And another thing which we started doing, Vanitha, is we also add it as their personal development goal. So there is a charter in terms of business goals or the KPIs which they have to deliver as an employee, but we also clearly, the manager snakes in and clearly says, hey, this is a development goal. So somebody's shy, they're not coming in. So either join this group or join an external network group. And majority of those are sponsored by the manager, by the organization. So it's an investment you're making to encourage them to start really blossoming and shining and moving out. So that's, I think, the stage which is being set for them.
So while you have discussed on all the dimensions on how we can bring in more women up the ladder, like from the freshers to middle management, from middle management to senior management, and from senior management maybe to C-suite and of course to board level, the last dimension that you might have to give some perspective is on how a person or a woman can actually find a coach or a mentor to probably close the last mile. And what would be the best tips to probably will HR have to do that, or can the woman herself come in, the mentee herself come in ahead and find out if she's eligible to pick up coaches and mentors for herself?
So there's several, opportunities available. We talk about sponsorship, we talk about advocacy, we also talk about mentors. So in a certain organization, a lot of corporates, especially the Fortune ones, have started adopting these measures. So what HR does is a very formal structuring of mentorship. So as we see, so the key talent, So among women, again, the key talent is captured. This is part of the talent management initiative. And they're all clearly given either a coach who could be external or internal for an assigned period, or they could be assigned a mentor in the organization. And the way it works is the choice is given to the woman, to the employee. So you are given profiles of various leaders within the organization who are at least 2 steps higher than the women employee, and say, all right, these are the leaders, these are the profiles. Now you choose who you would like to get mentorship from. You can choose more than one as well, because it's a time investment. So the women will go ahead and start looking at, they will read up. Of course, there'll be a lot of internal communication where they know who these leaders are, what they're doing, and it's global. We're not talking about just someone who is right across. So they can pick and choose who they would like to engage with. And we start putting the women in the driving seat, the women employee. We say, all right, it's your mandate. So that's the other piece. The moment HR drives it or somebody else drives it, then it's not my responsibility. Okay, it's a checkbox item. That is not how, because if it has to be totally embraced, then we would put them in the driving seat and say, hey, we will facilitate. We are creating this infrastructure for you, but you are responsible. It's part of your KPIs. See how you can leverage the mentorship. And even the mentor would say the same thing and say, oh, it's like, I'm the well, you can draw water from me. It's up to you as much as you want to draw. So the mentee has to choose to reach out to the mentor and say, find that time, make it interesting. So I'll give you an example. There could be a mentor. I had done it while I was at AMD as well, Vanitha, where I said, Lisa, she was the CEO, and there's so much to do. And I said, you have to mentor, because there are not too many women who've reached the stage you reached. So here you go. And I have assigned as a HR leader, where I had Dr. Lisa Su actually embrace and adopt 3 women across the globe who are still at a director. That's one of the designations or titles, but we wanted to move them to a VP level. And I said, unless you start mentoring while they're doing great in the engineering space, we want to grow more engineering hardware leaders among women. So, and I'm so proud today when I see each one of them who have accomplished that. And I continue, though I exited from the organization, they continue to talk to me. And I used to be their coach. So I was a coach, Lisa was the mentor. So we created enough infrastructure to help them articulate, and it's a safe place. We said, this is not your performance review. You failed, or you have a doubt, you have a problem, you just use us as sounding boards. And we're going to help you in terms of your leadership. How do you structure your conversations? How do you position yourself? How do you find your voice? Because a lot of times they're hesitant to speak up, and we would say, please. And the experiment worked. Similarly, we've done in sales and marketing as well, where we found women are not as many. And we started work. Even in countries like Europe, I'm not referring to only India. In Europe, we found, oh my God, we didn't have enough sales leaders among women. So we started again creating a mentoring framework where we invested in a cohort of women, and we said, okay, and we wanted the chief sales officer also to be one of those who coaches and guides them. All these experiments have absolutely succeeded in creating more gender balanced leadership layer at AMD as well.
While it makes economic sense for corporations to invest in their employees and identify coaches, mentors, what would you recommend if a woman would like to look at a coach or a mentor outside of the organization to give a separate objectivity to her career? And if she is interested, then what could be the possible forums where she could actually go out and seek such coaches or mentors?
So when we look at these conferences and seminars where we encourage employees to go to, and especially senior leadership layers, they participate in a lot of professional body engagements as well. We would love them to be interacting and networking, because that's one of the, if you do not have the external mindset and you're only looking inward, there are things you're missing out. So in your own growth path, leaders are always advised to actually participate in external networks. So when you're engaging yourself in external networks and professional bodies and so on, that's where we want them to seek out a mentor. And I'm very proud, Vanitha, you may be familiar, right? I mean, you led CII in different, ways,
capacities,
whether it's in IWIN or CII itself. So CII, as part of the HR panel, which I've been part of for many years, we have now institutionalized. What have we done? We said, we are going to mentor. So we are the external mentors, irrespective of where these rising stars are coming in from. We said, we will play your mentor. And we said, you can choose your mentor. So some of us, 10 of us as corporate leaders, they know us, they meet us, and then we say, oh, you can choose, and we will continue. So for a year, we have embraced, and we are so happy. Some of them actually moved on and attained bigger roles and so on. So that's for HR. But the same thing would exist when you're looking at the other layers, where they can reach out to the professional body organizations, where they network and they ask somebody to be their mentor.
Excellent piece of advice. In fact, what you said does resonate with me, because I think I found my own capabilities reinforced by external organizations. See, I've always grown up in family businesses, and being a woman in a family business, you always are playing second fiddle there, whether it's, to your husband. And I worked with my husband, with my brother, with my grandfather. So technically I was always the second fiddle. But when I actually blossomed is when I actually began leading external organizations. And as Lekha also pointed out, that trip to Manasarovar made me realize maybe some sort of an enlightenment happened. I was able to actually do it with conviction and with, with that grit and determination. So
Awesome.
I really would advocate for those upcoming rising stars, as you mentioned, to seek out external forums. And I think Divershefy would actually play a crucial role in such, in the careers of such rising stars. And not only within the country, but Divershefy has extremely good set of founding members and members from across the world and from different countries. So the different geographic, cultural diversity that the club brings, I think, is going to be adding immense value to everybody. So on that note, let me request Sylvia to share the results of the poll that we just took earlier. So yes, the first question was, does your organization have women executives on board? And 32% said yes, but only one. 5% unfortunately said yes, there are two. And 26% yes, three or more, but pretty good. But quite a big number, 37% said no. So I guess there is still quite a room for improvement.
Work to do.
A lot of work to do. And though there are pockets of excellence in every country, in every region, still worldwide, if you look at, I think UN Women did a study, they say that for actually getting equity for women, it's going to take another 200 years. So do we really have that much of patience, and are we willing to wait for that many years to achieve it? Or are the people today who are in the hot seat, are we going to push forward, and are we going to accelerate that growth and that development so that we open the gates more for women behind us? Let me start asking the questions. There are a number of questions in the chat box and in the Q&A. So I will start by asking a few of these questions, because I think most of them have really enjoyed the perspectives and the insights that you brought to the table today. This particular question is from Geeta Goti, another dear friend of mine. Not just organizations, but even HRD professionals, the association or the forum that you just mentioned has not seen a women president so far. So what would your take be? And I know for a fact that the HR fraternity has such wonderful women icons. Why isn't that this association has seen a women president so far?
I think again, Geeta, it's more of hi Geeta. It's wonderful to hear you raise a question. It's again the matter of choice, right? Are they ready? Earlier also I asked this question, are we ready? There are many of us. It's about the time. It's about how we are partitioning the time. And are we ready to take on this? So do not wait for someone to offer this to you on a platter. When we have so many women out there, I think we should only claim this or, and say, yes, we are here and let's go take it. But I'm proud. I mean, from a HR and other panels we're talking about, I've seen a lot of women rising and taking it up. And we've ensured even passing the baton, as we would say. I mean, I remember Uma, a very dear friend, Devagupta, who's no longer among us. She led many of those initiatives. I was working with her, and then she's like, Kiran, you need to take over. And then I passed it on to Rajita, again from Broadridge, who is currently, shouldering that. So we continue to start building this, and we have several male allies who are with us, right? Be it Sunil from Synchrony. I mean, I can name n number of them. So from Deloitte and so on. We all work in such cohesion. We just have to have that gumption, that courage to take that step. I think majority of the times women shy away or say, oh, I have this already on my plate. And but just to tell you, Geeta, AmCham, which is again a huge male domain because it's all American companies, a big network. I've been the chairperson for many years. So, and I'm from HR, and it's a purely business led. And I've been an AmCham chair for several years, and I continue to be a viable player there. So there are several organizations or associations where we are making a difference and creating the right impact. And I was on the board of AMD. I was on the board for India, of course, and I continue to be on the board for an NGO called United Way, Hyderabad. So there are lots of ways as an executive director, I played my part, and I continue to do this, where women are a force to reckon with. But we have to bring in more of them and ensure that we create the gender balance.
So that leads me to my next question, Kiran. Today, we see a lack of aspiration among the younger generation. So how do we inspire them to aspire for themselves? And the question that you asked, are we ready? Because when I was asked to head CII, I also was not really ready. I felt overwhelmed. But the very fact that I had male champions who did entrust this to me and said, no, we will stand behind you and we will ensure that you succeed, actually helped me get in. And of course, once I got in, I realized some latent passion in me that I should actually work for women's issues, especially in such a hugely male dominated area. So how do you expect the aspirations to come in from the next generation of women?
I have a different take on this, Vanitha. When I look at the young millennials, I don't think they have a paucity of aspiration. Uh, what they are looking at is very different from what the previous generations have looked at. For them, life today, because majority of us, for us, it was a very different agenda when you and I have to come in and start, whether it's in the family business or in the corporate world and so on. For them, it's no longer the standard of living, right? For us, it was the standard of living, which is in general the most important, be it or end all kind of thing. For them, it's a quality of life. They are very clear in terms of what they want out of life. Majority of the millennials we're referring to today. So when they are looking at quality of life, they're making their choices very clear right at the beginning, right at the onset. So they're like, I don't care to be there, or I don't want to do this. So it's a very different profiling, which you and I or Lekha, I mean, some of us did not even have that mindset at that point of time. We looked at life from a very different vantage point. So the way I look at youngsters is, it's not about aspirational deficit. It's about a very different clarity and perspective they have. These are the ones I am 100% clear will strike gold much earlier. So when I say strike gold, it's in terms of the board. It's in terms of getting that position and securing that position. But what we all need to do as responsible women who have gone through that and arrived where we are is inspiring them, sharing the experience so they will learn from our experience, but not go through the harder route, but take an easier route to get there. So they will find shortcuts because they're the digital age kids, and they're going to make it much faster and sooner, is how I look at it.
Spot on, Kiranmai, as usual. The next question is from an anonymous. I think the lady didn't choose to name herself, but I will read it out. I find in COVID times, especially in MNCs, more in the IT world, the women HR is signing off on wrong allegations done by male leaders to get rid of intelligent, high-performing women employees. They are keeping underperforming women who are not threats to them. And this is particularly happening in US. HR is again scared of not putting their foot down. Why is women HR an issue? And these companies are 30 plus years old. They have women on board. Can you please advise how to tackle this? I think this seems to be a personal question, but maybe you can, with your insights and expertise, give your answer to that.
It's interesting because it's very rare that someone is going to look at women HR and take them out, or unless there is some history and the organization is going through its own psychedelic trip. That's how I would look at it, because there must be some reasons which have compelled those leaders to take this. And the other point, which I will definitely ponder over, is the HR not having a voice or the spine or the courage to speak up and say, hey, this is not the done thing. This is unacceptable. We will have to retain high performing talent and let go of, underperforming talent. But that requires a lot more in terms of the cultural fabric of that organization. What is the cultural edifice of that organization? If that organization is not based on openness and transparency, and HR is not an influencer, obviously they're going to be what we refer to as carrying watermelons to the picnic. In a sense, they're there more as like, I won't deride any function. Every function has a play, but they're going to just be mute spectators and witnesses and just do as they are told, instead of leading and influencing the business or the leadership to say, this is not acceptable and here is it. So the due diligence of talent is absolutely seems to be lacking in that particular organization. And unless I know more details or understand that particular case, I think I will be shooting in the dark.
Very true. The next question is from Ekta Mahal, and she says that there seem to be challenges for the HR curriculum itself. Mainly, they are not able to connect them with the business goals. How do you address that?
That would be very unfortunate, Ekta. The organizations I have been part of, and also where I partner and advocate and work with other, in the ecosystem, what we have always worked at, and I can tell you, there are lots of times it looks like an argument or it requires a lot of courage as well. I can share with you a personal story again to bring it to life, what I remember. Several years ago, we had a leadership offsite, right, where we are harnessing the strategy roadmap for the organization. This is again AMD, where I spent a lot of time, and hence that's the stories I'm going to bring in. And then our dollar price, the stock price was at rock bottom, $1. It was terrible cannibalization. We were in terrible, terrible state. And that's when all the leaders across the globe were pulled in, VP and above, and we were all seated there at an offsite. It's a 3-day thing where we all have to come up with a clear roadmap. And along with the roadmap, people like me in the HR are supposed to create the constructive talent strategy. So that's where we are, very intense. And when we were doing this, one of the days we were seated, we were having the lunch break. And it was a very heated discussion prior to that in terms of what could be the roadmap. And for that roadmap, I was suggesting skill diagnostics because we are not yet there. The moment they talked about a particular product suite, I said, we don't even have the people. And immediately they said, what? I said, yeah, first we have to think about where do we grow so many people? How many do we need to get this kind of a product line out? So when we had this deep debate about it, and we sat down, Lisa came in, and she was the COO at that time, not yet the CEO. And she said, Kiranmai, you said something, can you just bring it about? I said, yeah, this is where we are. It's not going to take off. You can have any fancier roadmap, Lisa, I can tell you, but it's not going to take off because if you're not going to build in the talent strategy aligned with it, and we won't immediately start working on creating the relevant skill set internally as well as externally, this is going to fall apart very quickly. And then she said, oh, I didn't hear anybody speak about that. I said, this is my job. I am the HR, so I'd better speak up. If others haven't thought about it, I'm not going to speak for them, but I can speak for. So she said, oh my God, but what you're saying makes sense. And then that afternoon, you won't believe it, she said, I really think this is important. Without this, if we just look at the product suite, we're not going to do anything. So she started leading that session and she said, let's start looking at the challenges of this. So we created work streams where we started talking about talent strategy. One work stream is talking about business strategy. And then how do we? The reason I shared that is if organizations can start working so cohesively and they are able to think through that these two have to align and match, only then the organization can move ahead to fulfill its objectives or the business targets. I think that's when things occur. So what you just mentioned about HR then, yeah, that's the death toll, right? The bell has already started ringing if they haven't aligned the talent strategy.
So true, Kiranmai. The next question is from Sarah. And she has a couple of questions in which she has been asking, how do we educate girls and of course their parents and male siblings from a very young age to be proud of their spirit and ambition and vision? And she goes on to ask that though women are raised to think that assertiveness and ambition and large strategic visions beyond the home and hearth are very ugly and feminine, but they will always be desirable to men, and will have to make a choice between pursuing a larger purpose outside of the home and love and companionship. So they are always tentative and trying to toe a fine line so that they don't cross over and become undesirable. So what is your take on that? And by that, does it mean that all of us have become undesirable? I don't think so. Yeah.
No, I think what Sarah is referring to is those unfortunate and difficult truths we all come across at times. I'm reminded of the work we do as an NGO, and when we've adopted some of the, I mean, this is Hyderabad, I'm not even referring to some official areas or, and Hyderabad is an urban, all of us know. In Hyderabad, when we went into certain deeper parts of the city, and we started looking at certain communities. I do not want to name the community because my thought process is not aimed at a particular community. It can happen in any community. We found that women are so much more marginalized. It's not just denial of education, rights, anything. I mean, they just don't have a voice. But when we started reaching out and started working with the local, as we say, NGOs, and said, we really want them to be able to have an identity and start work. Today, it fills me with pride. We've adopted this, and it was a multi-year project we've undertaken, and we've invested. So what we've done is we've looked at communication skills. We talked about their own healthcare. We said, we will do it in a couple of hours, whenever you can take time off from your domestic chores. And we did it right there in their mohalla. So we went and adopted these little primary healthcare centers, or what you say, which government led. So spoke to the principal secretary and others and GHMC, everybody, and said, can you allow us to use these? And this is our purpose. And they said yes. So, or the schools which they have. And what we've done is the 1 hour or 2 hours they can get away when the men folk are away or they're doing something else. We would invite them to come in, and we said, okay, you will have these tutors and trainers. So language and communication skills, computer skills or digital skills, public speaking capability, presentation capability, and then any other skill or hobby which they have. Could be anything, right? Whether it's tailoring and whatever. We said we are open. You tell us what do you want to pursue. So we created each one of these, had the tutors available, and after a year, it's so heartening how they, I mean, my God, some of them started writing poetry in English where they didn't even know anything about it. The confidence with which we brought in the US Consul General and others, Vanitha, when we were just unveiling this, they actually stood in front of them, looked the
In the
US
eye.
Consul General in the eye, and they were able to, greet. And of course, they were in that burqa and whatever. So it was astounding. You just have to invest, and really, it's like peeling the onion. We have to take those first few steps to start educating the stakeholders, the communities. It's a huge thing. I'm not saying it's easier said or done, but unless majority of us who are fortunate, if we can start building this. So same thing with you, Sarah. If you have arrived, can you work with those communities, those families and others, and start sensitizing them and slowly move them from the darkness to the light, is how I would look at it, because it takes a lot to start erasing whatever has been, plugged in for generations. So it's about those biases and helping them look at the right role models and look at what can be achieved by some of these women if they get the right footing. That's all I can say.
So beautifully explained, Kiranmai, and you have actually walked the talk. Not only gender balanced leadership in the corporate arena, but you have been able to bring that to the social arena or to the community level. And what you have done has affected so many stakeholders, and this will actually have a multiplicative effect, and that will actually bode well for society as a whole. It was really wonderful chatting with you. I think I really don't know how the last 1.5 hours has just sped by. The only thing missing was maybe a cup of coffee in both our hands, or maybe a glass of wine in all our hands. But I really enjoyed having this fireside chat with you. And to sum up, I will actually hand over to Lekha to again do it in her very poetic way. So Lekha, thank you, and thank you for Divershefy for allowing me to come on second time onto this panel to have a very, very productive and an effective chat with Kiranmai. So over to you, Lekha.
Thank you so much, the two of you. I mean, very great perspective. I love the examples that you brought out, Kiran. I think not only the one about Mercer, Sodexo, and Unilever, but I think the one that really touched me was the way in which you spoke about Western Digital, and 50% of the board already being women, as well as at the top leadership. I think those are the arenas the examples that we really look for. So those are great ideas. I like the employee resource group that you spoke of as well, where young women who are entering the workforce, probably from tier 2 and tier 3 cities, are then given this the platform to be able to interact with others and to grow. The other thing that I liked was, the sponsorship for Grace Hoppers, and also the way in which you are looking at the mentoring. The line that struck me there was, okay, I'm an open well, so you can come and draw as much water as you want from me. And I think people often mistake the difference between coaching and mentoring. And I hope those senior women who are going to be joining Divershefy Club will be able to understand how we can actually help to leverage them into the boardroom through the right kind of mentoring opportunities. Vanitha, thank you so much for the very centered angles that you brought on the table. That was wonderful. And the thought-provoking questions by the audience also are totally a tribute to the two of you, because you have engaged them in totality through and through. So thank you for that. Given that gender balance is such an urgent requirement, the conversation has very clearly shown how HR's many facets quite naturally sets the stage, going back to my starting analogy of theater. And Divershefy Club is the game changer here. It is the NSD, or the National School of Drama, so to speak. Divershefy's gamut of initiatives gives both HR and talented senior women the support that is required to bring about the gender balance by increasing the available talent pool, showcasing them for board positions, helping women to gain visibility via the professional speaker opportunities, the networking via club events, as well as the the peer experiential learning that you will get an opportunity for out here, the grooming via mentoring, and the master classes, not to forget, and the list goes on. There is more than enough reason for all of you in the audience today to grab that membership of Divershefy Club right now. There is a current promotional offer and it's fast running out of time. It finishes with the launch week. So I urge you to be able to take that on. But I must really leave it to Sylvia to give you a bit more about Divershefy and the offer. And then she would officially close the session. From my side here on the dais, thank you everybody. And thank you most of all to both of you, Vanitha and Kiranmai. It was a pleasure.
Thank you,
The
Lekha.
moderator for this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Lekha. Thank you,
Over
Kiran.
to you, Sylvia.
Thank you so much. Thank you again to Vanitha and Kiranmai for joining us today for such an interesting discussion, answering so many questions. There's one question I would like to quickly respond to. The question was, will Divershefy also look at cultural diversity amongst women? And the answer is yes. I just want to say that we invite as much cultural diversity in terms of the women pool as possible. So if you have people who are who would like to join, please encourage them to join. So tomorrow's topic will be on the influence of gender balanced leadership on corporate culture. And the speakers will be Chris Bedar, who is the CEO of PeopleSmart, as well as Shailendra Goswami. He's the chairman and managing director of Pushkaral Group. The session will start at the same time as we started today. Lekha mentioned masterclasses, so we want to offer you a first masterclass on emotional intelligence, which will happen on 20th of October for free. You can email us at info@divershefy.com, not .club, but the info@divershefy.com with a subject line masterclass and your LinkedIn profile and WhatsApp number, and we will send you the registration link for that free masterclass. Starting in November, we will offer 3 sessions every month. One on the 1st of the month, we will release a new feature of Divershefy Club, and you will also have the possibility to engage with founding members. And these sessions are free and open to the public. On the 10th of each month, we will have the masterclasses, which will be held only accessible to the Divershefy Club members, with the exception of the first one on October 20th. And on the 20th of each month following, we will have a fireside chat or panel discussion like the one we had today, which will be free for members, and the public can join through paid access. We will have a calendar coming up with the speakers for the rest of the year and the beginning of next year, which will be announced on October 11th. So we hope that this session inspired you to join the Divershefy Club, and you can sign up to become a member at www.divershefy.club. Here you can also find out more about what Divershefy is, what we do, and our new approach to increasing the number of women in top leadership positions. So sign up today to secure the pre-launch price offer, as Lekha mentioned. Join us again tomorrow on the topic of influence of gender balanced leadership on corporate culture. And other than that, it's just goodbye, good night, Asia, good night, and good evening, Europe and Middle East, and have a nice day in America.